We start today with the news out of Venezuela, where U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido has just proclaimed himself the acting president. Now, President Donald Trump released a statement recognizing Guaido as the interim president of the South American country. In response, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro accused the United States of ordering a coup of his government. For more, return investigative journalist Ben Swann. Thanks for joining me, Ben.
Hey, Scotty, how are you?
Okay, so now President Trump today has formally recognized Venezuelan opposition leader Guaido as the legitimate interim president of the country. Why is the Trump administration and the United States of America getting involved in calling Guaido legitimate?
Okay, I mean, it's a great question. It's a question why we do this in any country. But in this particular case, there's a strategic plan here. So Guaido is, set up as the National Assembly leader. And he says he's actually the legitimate president of the country because of Article 233 in the Venezuelan Constitution. So Article 233 essentially says this, that if there is an acting president who is usurping the Constitution, then the head of the National Assembly has the ability to declare themselves president and be the interim president until new elections can be held. So that's the process that Juan Guaido is following right now. The problem, of course, is that in order to make that happen, you need two things to take place. One is you need backing of other countries. In this case, the United States, about 28 European countries, Colombia, some other South American countries are backing him. That means financially they would be backing him as well and possibly freezing the assets of the Venezuelan government. But you also need the army to be involved. That's what Juan Guaido has been asking for all day, for the army to back him. And so far, we're not sure if that's going to happen. It looks like it might not happen.
Well, that's a very important part, obviously, is the military. What are the people saying on the streets? How are they reacting to this now, what looks to be a possible split government leadership?
Yeah, well, it is a split government leadership, and essentially what you could have are two parallel governments operating at the same time. Guaido has a huge support base in Venezuela, which obviously has enormous problems as a country. Inflation has run amok there. The cost of living for people is in a desperate situation. So many people are actually turning to crypto to be able to work around that inflation problem. But Venezuela has been in a terrible state for a long time. And so there's a large amount of the public that supports him. He's young, he's 35 years old and very charismatic. But at the same time, there's an older generation that is highly suspicious of anything that the West does, specifically that the United States does in Latin America and South America, that they see as being almost a dark horse trying to come in and create all kinds of problems and destabilization. So there is definitely a split within the population of Venezuela as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing.
Ben, you've got to laugh at kind of the irony of this. Here in the United States, we have a government that is shut down, and in Venezuela right now, it looks like they have two different governments that are trying to operate. So it's kind of interesting that President Trump would even get involved in the first place. You've also had Vice President Pence getting involved, and like you mentioned, 20-plus other countries around the world. But what kind of effect will that have besides just cutting off the spigots of money? If you do not get the military to get behind this president, where does this country go?
Right. Well, so far today, late today, and since we've talked last, the defense minister in Venezuela says that the army will not support Guaido and they will not get behind him. If they don't. Now, that may be political speak, but if they don't physically do it, then he has no chance. I mean, he would physically have to operate this parallel government from a separate embassy somewhere in Venezuela. So it's very unlikely that he would be able to outlast Maduro in that case. But at the same time, like you said, aside from freezing the funding, there isn't a whole lot other countries can do unless the U.S. and some of these other coalition countries say, well, look, the government's going to arrest him, they're going to create violence against citizens, and we have a military option. I don't see that happening right now. I can't imagine that happening, especially, so close to home. But at the same time, I guess you never know. What it really comes down to is this. The Trump administration back in September, there were rumors and reports in the New York Times that they were trying to instigate a military coup at that time in Venezuela, which fell apart. So the U.S., and long before Trump, and Obama and Bush, had been trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government for some time. Before Maduro, it was Hugo Chavez. And so this is nothing new that the U.S. wants to make and see a regime change there, but it's got to come from inside if it's going to happen. It can't come from outside forces.
Okay, so at the present right now, there was an election last May that actually elected, whether they say it was also not actually, Maduro was elected supposedly by the people. That's where a lot of the controversy comes from. Where can Guaido right now, where does he operate his government out of?
Well, he would have to, as I said, Guaido would have to run this National Assembly government, this parallel government, would have to operate out of an embassy somewhere in Venezuela. So right now there is no location for this to happen. You know, Maduro is obviously not going to tolerate it for very long. So we're talking about really an issue of days here. Does Guaido move to an embassy? Does he get his government into that? Does he get protection from other countries from the outside? That's the most likely scenario. Maduro will likely have him arrested in a very short amount of time, especially if it is true that the military, that the army is on his side. So it's come down to the issue of the military. I suspect that the Trump administration, these other 28 European countries and some other Latin American countries like Colombia that are backing him and saying that he is the legitimate leader, that Guaido is the legitimate leader, that they were hoping to influence the military by saying we're going to support this and therefore financially support it. We have to wait and see, I guess, over the next couple of days who the army actually backs.
Well, I think these next few hours, especially these next few days, are going to be extremely crucial in the future and whether there's going to be peace in regards to this issue. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks, Scotty.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.